So let me ask you about Trump, and then let me ask you about Bobby. And I have a clip of the interview you did with him that's going to be out tomorrow. Actually, let's start with that, because there's something provocative in here. Bobby Kennedy Jr. told you that he offered a proposal to President Trump, President Biden, which is, of course, going to make people wonder because, you know, he's a big X factor. Let's look at a little piece of Dr. Phil's interview with Bobby Kennedy Jr.
I said to President Biden, I sent him a proposal. I said, let's do a spoiler agreement where we will co-fund a poll together, the two of us, and whoever in October and whoever is least likely to vote to beat Donald Trump will withdraw. Oh, do I expect that he will take that deal? No. But, you know, I'm not a spoiler. A spoiler is somebody who cannot win.
And stays in.
And they stay in and disrupt the expectations of somebody who can.
So you've made him that offer?
I've made him that offer, yeah.
Has he responded at all?
No.
Well, you can't be surprised he didn't respond. But, Phil, what was your read on Bobby and on what he believes he means in this race?
Well, you know, he says in all sincerity that he's in it to win it. He thinks that a lot of things can happen in the next 5 months. And I don't think he believes that President Biden is going to be the candidate in 5 months. I don't think he believes the Democrats are going to turn to him if President Biden drops out. But he thinks a lot can happen between now and then. And of course, he is extremely frustrated that nobody will talk to him. And that's one of the things that I want to do is I want to give everybody a voice.
Good.
I mean, I want to own the debate lane in America, and I want him to have a chance to say what he has to say.
Good. Although, to use a word that you use more often, we've had enough debate. Debates about gotchas and debates about games. Conversation, that's what you're best at, Phil, is starting conversations and having people have discussions where they're going to agree and disagree, and that's okay. It's how you do it. Conversation could be a cure, and you would be very high on my list of people who could apply that remedy. Now, you also recently interviewed former President Trump, and you had a very interesting discussion with him, which I think is going to be very important to the voters. What's the big fear for a lot of people with Trump? What will he do if he gets back in? Because all he talks about is revenge. Watch this clip.
But there are headlines out there that say, when you win your second term, that you are going to make the people that have come after you pay. What if when you win this election, you said, enough is enough? I think you have so much to do, you don't have time to get even. You only have time to get right.
Well, revenge does take time, I will say that.
It does.
And sometimes revenge can be justified, Phil. I have to be honest. You know, sometimes it can.
Uh-oh. What did you make of that suggestion?
Well, you know, we kept talking about this, and, you know, people can, you know, focus on different parts of his answer. And trust me, I'm not naive. I don't think that I had one conversation with him and he reversed his position. But look, one of the things I asked him later in that conversation, Chris, and I know you probably saw it, I said, let me ask you this. Has it helped the country to have people coming after you? And he had to say no. I mean, it's been a waste of time for people coming after me. Then how is it going to help the country with you going after them? Listen, everybody's tired of that. Nobody wants all of this, got you, I'm going to get you, you're going to get me. That's like kids in the playground going after each other. Nobody's interested in their personal agendas. They're interested in what can you do for this country? What can you do to put food on the table? What can you do to keep people employed? What can you do to get my children educated? And Chris, you know me, I'm not a politician. I don't know politics. I think a lot of people that talk about politics don't know anything about it. I'm just willing to admit I don't know anything about it. What I focus on are the social issues, the things that impact the families. And right now, I think our educational system, for example, is on the brink of a catastrophic collapse. People need to be focusing on that sort of thing. They don't give a damn about whether he gets even or somebody strikes back. It's like, get over it. Come on, focus on what we hired you to do, what we voted for you to do. I think they would say that to Biden. I think they would say that to Bobby Kennedy. I think they would say that to Donald Trump.
It's easier, certainly, for Bobby to field that question, easier for Biden to field that question. There are a lot of people who want Donald Trump to be president to be a disruptor, to break stuff, to go after people. He is the grievance candidate. Now, my belief is there are not enough of those voters to win a national election. They'll be overwhelming in a primary, but they can't get him across the finish line. And he's going to have to reach out to people who are sick of left and right and their grievances and just want reasonable. Do you think he has it in him to do that?
I think he does, and I think he's going to have to if he wants to win. Look, your story goes really well when you're the only one telling it. You know, if you're talking to, if you're in the bubble and you're talking to people that are all like-minded, you know, it goes really well. Everybody's agreeing with you. Nobody's challenging what you're saying. And that's true of whoever the candidate is. But when people start saying, hold on a minute, I've got some issues, I've got some agendas here, then all of a sudden that conversation can kind of dry up and people get tired of hearing about all of your personal grievances. They said, when is it my turn?
Yes.
When is it America's turn? When is it my children's turn? When is it my turn in the grocery store? When is it my turn at the gas pump? When is it my turn at the border? I think that's what people are interested in hearing about. Sorry you got your feelings hurt. What are you going to do for me? People talk about politics being local. Look, politics aren't local. Politics are personal. People want to know what is in this for me. I'm not saying people are selfish, but at some point, they want to say, what's in this for me and my family and my ability to take care of my own? You can't give away what you don't have. And if you aren't secure and safe, then you can't start taking care of other people.
100%. You get a big amen from me. I'm going to have to go from Dr. Phil to Father Phil, because preach, brother, preach. I'm telling you right now. I think people should be selfish. They need to be more selfish in their politics. Stop taking the bait and joining other people's enragement movements and start thinking about their own and what's best for their family. But we'll see. Tomorrow night is a big night, Dr. Phil. You have an open invitation to come back and discuss with us what you thought about the debate and the campaign going forward. I wish you all good things.
Well, I appreciate it. And, you know, I hope all of these candidates, even going into the debate tomorrow here, that people are tired of folks that are trying to win an argument. They're interested in hearing people trying to solve problems. And there is a huge difference between winning an argument and solving a problem. And that's what they're interested in. They're going to be listening to see, is he trying to solve a problem or is he trying to win an argument? And I want to hear people solving problems like we elected them to do. They're going to be listening for problem solvers up there, not people that are trying to win the argument in the moment. Enough of that. Let's start solving problems, and God knows we got enough of them that need it.
I hope you're right, Dr. Phil. Appreciate it. Everybody can see Phil's full interview with Bobby Kennedy Jr. tomorrow on Dr. Phil Prime Time. Dr. Phil McGraw, appreciate you. See you again. Hey, thank you for watching. Please go to NewsNationNow.com, NewsNationNow.com, and you can find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button down below. Then you will get more of News Nation's fact-driven coverage.